Yeah, so this is a piece of work that we are excited to share. It's very much ongoing in the really in the early stage, but I would really love to hear the comments from the audience. So, Craig, how many minutes do I have?
We originally talked about, we had talked about 10 to 12, and then for each, people can do ask questions in the chat, and then if there's Q&A at the end, if there's time, we'll do it.
Okay, great. I will keep it within 8 minutes. I love to hear what people think about this. So this is an investigation motivated from a paper revision we had before, later published at the Annals of Internal Medicine. The paper was about using real-world pediatric EHR data to evaluate the real-world protection of the COVID vaccine against the long-term infection and potential long COVID outcomes. And one of the exercises we conducted when we analyzed that data was that we need to use negative control outcomes to evaluate how credible our estimates are, and potentially use negative control outcomes to calibrate the estimate. And of course, the question boils down to, what negative outcome control outcome should we use? And there are, as we know, the OHDSI list of negative control outcomes, like in green now, those type of outcomes. But there was a particular outcome that was suggested by the reviewer, which is this 14 days infection, because biologically, we also from the early trials, people know that it took time for COVID vaccine to be effective. So then if you observe anything like the infection within a week after the vaccination or within 2 weeks after the vaccination, those protection could be an artifact. And we can use that artifact to calibrate the results. But the debate was that, is this documented infection within 14 days after vaccination truly a negative control outcome or not? So later on, we actually had a chance to formally investigate this problem using sequential targeted trial emulation. So just some background. So negative control outcomes, this is a very important step we encourage people to do in the real-world evidence generation process. So it's a very powerful tool. The key reference, one of the key references is this PNAS paper published by Martin and the colleagues back in 2018. So we can use this exercise to do some diagnosis of the results, and we can also use the negative control outcome results to calibrate. And the other, as I said, this ongoing debate is that should we use this infection within first 2 weeks as one of the negative control outcomes? And here are the two papers that really motivated this investigation. So the first paper was published at the New England Journal of Medicine, and Miguel Hernan, who coined the term of targeted trial emulation, was one of the co-authors. As you can see, if you plot the cumulative incidence after the vaccination, so within 14 days, we have two groups, vaccine group and one unvaccinated group. There's no separation in this cumulative incidence. That suggests there's no effect in this first 14 days, and this seems to be infection within first 14 days should be considered as an NCO. And on the other hand, Anna and George did an investigation later published at BMJ. I think George could have a better summary of this work, but my takeaway is that they by conducting some charter reviews, they found that possibly the people who reported the negative control reported their the COVID infection tend to be more severe cases, and so there is a possibility that there's the documentation process of the COVID infection could be miscapturing or undercapturing the true COVID infection. So this documentation process, if we think about the real world data, so the EHR data need to capture the COVID infection. So there's a documentation process. So if we consider documented infection within the first 2 weeks, seems that there is some sort of a protection. So as you can see, the two results are in general not very consistent, right? So we used this pediatric EHR data cohort called PISNet. We conducted this sequential trial emulation to investigate this problem. So basically, as you can see in this diagram, we have two cohorts, and we have consider first dose of COVID vaccine as exposure, and we have this calendar time from time 0 to 14 days, and we match the calendar date with this first dose of the of vaccination, and then we consider the outcome in the unvaccinated group is also within 14 days, and here. To avoid this so-called immortal time bias, we implemented this sequential trial emulation, but that's the more technical side. So the study setup is that we have a large database, PISNet accounting for about 7% of US pediatric population. And we have this selection criteria. We consider adolescents, and the intervention is the first dose of COVID vaccine versus no any type of COVID vaccine. And we used this sequential targeted trial emulation to avoid a potential immortal time bias. And the outcome model is that we use a modified Poisson regression. Also, why the outcome is considered as a binary outcome, the infection within 14 days. But here we didn't use the logistic regression. We used the Poisson regression for better clinical interpretation because the coefficient has the interpretation of log relative risk. So finally, we investigated this, conducted this hypothesis testing procedure to compare this 14 days infection against this normal so-called OHDSI NCOs, because from the earlier papers published at OHDSI, there is a common set of negative control outcomes, and also Patrick and Ryan shared a list of NCOs that we can use, like ingrowing nail and those variables. So basically, for each potential NCO, we run this analysis. We estimate this the causal effect beta 1. So this is the attrition table, as you can see here. We have studied from about 250,000 patients. We end up with 25,000 patients for the vaccinated group and unvaccinated group. And here is this overall survival probability, the Kaplan-Meier curve. As you can see, we do see a separation within first 14 days. And we also looked into the influenza as another outcome. As we can see, also there is a separation. So we know biologically it takes some time for the vaccine to take effect. But empirically, using the EHR data, we do see such a separation between the two groups. So we are trying to find out what's going on. So one of the things we did was that we used this forest plot to visualize the estimated protection against the general NCO. For example, acute injury. Here is the acute injury or the ingrowing nail, and we also have the some other acute injuries, acute injury of finger, and those type of outcomes are less likely to be associated with COVID vaccine, right? So, but on the other hand, if you look at the confidence interval for the candidate NCO, which is 14 days infection, so you can see this confidence interval seems to be quite different from the rest of the estimate. So this yellow band is a confidence band estimated from the general NCO. So this is suggesting something is going on with a different mechanism in the causal diagram, such that it's not exchangeable compared to other NCOs. And we also looked beyond 14 days. As expected, beyond 14 days, the documented infection is showing being very different from the rest of the NCO outcomes. So if you look at the influenza as another outcome, influenza seems to be also very different from the others. But also biologically COVID vaccine should not have direct protection for influenza within 14 days or beyond 14 days, right? But when we look beyond 14 days, influenza seems to be more exchangeable to the rest of NCO. So this is our finding. Also put in this formula, the funnel plot, we can see flu and the COVID infection within 14 days seems to be very different from the others. So here we offer a possible explanation. So actually, there was an earlier paper published by Jamie Robbins and Eric Chichen in our department. So it's called this conditional separable effect. So this is from a discussion with Patrick earlier in the summer. So vaccination, if you think about it as an event, vaccination alone maybe have multiple implications. There's a biological exposure for the patients who took the vaccination, right? So it's going to change your body. On the other hand, the vaccination itself has this behavior change because the doctor is likely to tell the patients saying, oh, in the next week or two, you may be experiencing some flu-like symptoms. If that happened, it's normal, right? So this biological, this we call it a behavior exposure to the patients is going to also change the reporting behavior for the patients. So for some patients who actually truly got the vaccination, got the COVID within 14 days, because they have this comments from the clinician, they actually tend to less likely to report their COVID infection. So as you can see here, this is going to change how this vaccination is got documented. So this Y0 is the true COVID infection, but Y0 is not perfectly captured by EHR. It's only captured through this reporting process, right? So this behavior is going to actually have some impact on this. But if you look at the beyond 14 days, the biological exposure is going to impact both true COVID infection and the documented infection. So this is something really interesting going on, meaning that this intervention V actually has two implications, as biological implications and also behavior implication. So just to summarize, so the bottom line is that this documented infection within 14 days at least seems to not to be exchangeable with common OHDSI NCOs like acute injuries. A possible explanation is a health-seeking behavior that which is time dependent within 14 days and beyond 14 days. And Martin also offered some comments that in general, this utility or relevance of NCO really depends on the hypothesis of interest, meaning that which type of systematic bias you want to carry over to the outcome of interest so that you want to calibrate. So anyway, that's from me. So any comments or any critics are highly appreciated. So thank you.